A study conducted by the Data Collaborative for Justice at John Jay College examined jail admissions, length of stays, average daily populations at Louisville, Durham, and St. Louis. The study found that while jail admissions were down in all three cities from 2014 to 2019, the average length of stays increased by more than 3 days. More extended stays for younger people and violent offenders and the inability to pay bail are cited as the key drivers for the increase. According to the study, Black people were substantially overrepresented in the number of occupied bed days, which is classified by being jail for more than 12 hours. In Durham, Black people accounted for 78% of the bed days in jail. It was 67% in St. Louis and 49% in Louisville. Black people in each city were jailed for more extended periods on average than their white counterparts under a similar set of circumstances. In Louisville, on average, Black people were detained 12 more days than whites. The same held true in St. Louis with 11 days longer and in Durham with 3 days longer. These numbers underscore how aspects of the criminal justice system disproportionately impact the Black community, as Black people make up less than 30% of the population in all three of these cities. Joining us to discuss is the criminal justice research manager at Pew Charitable Trusts, Tracy Velazquez. So Tracy, help us to understand why this would be. Is this a failure of the cash bail system, which is responsible for these extended stays, or are they getting, somehow a differential in the way they are treated by the judges and the judicial system that make their stays longer?
Those are some great questions. And unfortunately, our jail data is only able to go so far. We do know that Black people were staying longer in jail, even after adjusting for things like their charge and other characteristics. So there definitely is something going on besides just what they're accused of what crime they're accused of for going into jail. In terms of the different aspects of it, we do know that bail plays a large role in it, because if you're not able to afford bail, then you can't get out of jail. And we know that lower income communities, they're struggling sometimes to even make small amounts of bail. In terms of other possible reasons for this, it could be just judicial discretion. We really did not look at that. And it could be things like specific characteristics of that jail. For example, if they have a jail review that looks at ways to get people out of jail who've been there for a while, or if people just tend to stay there longer.
So is this an issue of, we cannot, that the mass incarceration system will not release its fangs from society as easy as just not locking up as many people? Like, is the machine does it just have an appetite, just going to fill up those beds regardless, some way or another, either with more bodies or with more time?
That's a great question. I am concerned that we saw this trend that we saw in these three cities nationally as well, that as admissions went down, lengths of stay went up. During the pandemic, we just had released data this morning from the Department of Justice that shows that length of stay went up about 6%, about 2 more days in 2020 compared with 2019. So this trend is continuing. We did see jail populations drop during the pandemic quite a bit, by about a quarter, as there were fewer people being arrested, we did see some jails releasing some folks. But we also saw that, I was looking at the data today, this was not equally shared. So about 28%, there was about a 28% drop in terms of white individuals in jail, whereas in terms of Black individuals, they saw a smaller drop. They saw about a 22% drop in their population. So we're seeing, continuing racial disparities, even as we saw jail populations drop this year.
Can any of these longer jail times be explained away by the backlogs that the pandemic created? You know, there was a period where, you know, the courts were just shut down, and when they opened back up, they had this enormous backlog of cases that they had to work through. Can they explain any of that away with that, or is it just, you know, do these disparities exist beyond that backlog?
Well, the data that we looked at was before the pandemic, so it ended in the end of 2019. So the disparities that we saw in lengths of stay, in share of bed days and all that were pre-pandemic. Obviously, the data that we saw that was released today, which is from really just the first half of 2020, already shows these disparities in terms of the number of people in jail. National data does not show differences in, for example, lengths of stay by race, by age, by ethnicity. So, you know, I think one of the challenges that we face is that we just don't have national data that can tell the story. We really do have to rely on local data from sort of like we did in Louisville, Durham, and St. Louis, because you can't really get at these disparities with this national level data.
I just want to know what your opinion is on the cash bail system. It is expensive to keep people in jails, and very often the cost to keep them in is higher than the amount that we're asking them to pay in bail. And as you were just pointing out, many low-income people struggle with even the smallest amount of bail. Is the cash bail system a failed system?
I think there's a lot of concerns with using cash to determine whether someone should stay in jail or not. What we should really be thinking about is, are they a flight risk, or are they potentially someone who could cause harm in the community if they're released? So, for example, in a domestic violence case, it could be that that person should stay in jail at least until a safety plan is developed, or other ways of protecting an individual are worked out. But, you know, what we have seen is that there's other ways to keep people safe. There's other ways to address, to supervise people prior to their court date. And we're also seeing that many people are going into jail who don't need to go into jail in the first place. So one of the other projects we at Pew are working on is looking at emergency response and finding alternatives to people who are in behavioral health crisis besides police, because we know many of the folks who end up in jail have behavioral health issues. One of the other findings of the report was that about 40% of the people who entered jail in 2014 returned to jail one or more times, and many of those folks are folks who have these sort of struggles with behavioral health issues, mental health, and substance use.
Tracy Velazquez, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Very enlightening.